Welcome, my family. Before we jump in, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. I'd also love to know, where are you watching from and what time is it there? Drop your answers and any suggestions in the comments, and I might give you a shout out at the end of my next video. Thanks for being here and for all your amazing support.
Every hospital has a story people whisper about. An old wing, a locked room, a place where something terrible happened long ago. At St. Helena Medical Center, that place was Ward C. The staff said that it had been closed for renovations for years, but no one ever saw construction workers there. No one ever saw new paint, new tiles, or new wiring go in. It was just sealed. Nurse Ellen Brooks had heard the rumors when she joined the night shift. Everyone warned her to stay clear of Ward C after midnight. They said lights flickered on by themselves, call buttons glowed even though no patients were registered, and sometimes, only sometimes, the intercom crackled with voices that didn't belong to anyone alive. She didn't believe in ghosts. Not really. But that changed one November night. It was a quiet shift. The halls were dim, the floors freshly polished. Ellen was updating patient charts when she heard a ding. The sound came from the call light panel, a soft chime that meant a patient had pressed the bedside button. She looked at the board. The light blinking was C17. Her brows knitted. That can't be right. The East Wing had rooms labeled A through F, but Ward C had been empty for nearly a decade. She thought it was a glitch. Still, she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that spread across her chest. She radioed to the front desk. "Hey, do you see a call light from Ward C?" There was a pause, static crackling over the line. "Negative. Ward C's closed, Ellen. You're seeing things." She stared at the blinking light on the panel. "Yeah," she whispered. "Must be." But it didn't stop. It just kept blinking. By 2 a.m., curiosity got the better of her. She grabbed her flashlight and decided to check it out. The entrance to Ward C was at the far end of the east hallway, behind a faded sign that read, "Authorized personnel only." The lock was broken, the double doors slightly ajar. A faint draft brushed past her as she pushed them open. Inside, it smelled like damp concrete, an old disinfectant. The air was colder here, heavy with silence. Dust covered the floor, and plastic sheets hung from the ceiling like shrouds. The beam of her flashlight cut through the darkness. Room after room was empty, stripped of beds and equipment. But when she reached halfway down the hall, she saw something strange. A soft red glow flickered from beneath the door labeled C17. Her stomach twisted. That was the same number that blinked on the panel. She took a breath, her pulse quickening, and slowly pushed the door open. The room was freezing. A single fluorescent bulb on the ceiling flickered weakly, filling the space with sickly light. In the center of the room was an old hospital bed, rusted, mattress torn, and sitting on the edge of it was a child. A small boy, no older than 8, wearing a pale blue hospital gown. His skin looked almost translucent in the dim light. He turned his head toward her, his voice barely above a whisper. "Where's my mom?" Ellen froze. Her throat went dry. "Sweetheart, what are you doing here?" He didn't answer, just kept staring, eyes hollow, lips trembling. She took a careful step forward. "It's late. Let's get you somewhere warm, okay?" But as soon as she moved closer, the lights flickered violently, the room plunged into darkness, and the door slammed shut behind her. Her flashlight flickered, catching glimpses of movement. The boy was gone. "Hello?" she called, voice shaking. "It's okay. I'm here to help you."
The only response was a faint dragging sound, like bare feet sliding across tile. Then came a whisper right beside her ear. "She left me." She spun around. Nothing. The flashlight beam caught only the peeling walls and the empty bed. Then she saw it. Tiny handprints on the glass window, smeared across the inside too small to be adult. The red glow returned, coming from the heart monitor beside the bed. It was unplugged, yet the screen showed a flat line. A cold wind brushed her neck. The boy's voice came again from somewhere behind her. She said she'd come back, but she never did. She turned slowly. The boy now stood in the corner, his head tilted at an unnatural angle, eyes wide and glassy. "Sweetheart," she whispered. He smiled weakly. Then his face began to change. The pale skin darkened to gray. His lips cracked, eyes bleeding black tears. His mouth opened wider, too wide, stretching down his face. "She never came back," he screamed, his voice echoing through the room. The walls shook, the bed rattled violently, and the monitor spiked with a long, high-pitched beep. Ellen covered her ears, screaming for help. Then, silence. When she opened her eyes again, the boy was gone. The red light had vanished. The room was still. She ran. She didn't care about the doors or the dust or the warnings. She sprinted out of Ward C and back to the nurse's station. "Something's in there!" she shouted. "There's a child! A boy! He's trapped!" The night staff looked at her like she'd gone mad. "Ellen, Ward C's been closed since 1989. There's no one in there." She insisted they check. But when security opened the door, the hallway was empty again. Every room dark, every door sealed. They found her flashlight lying just outside room C17. Ellen refused to work nights after that. She transferred to day shifts and never mentioned it again. But the story didn't end there. 2 weeks later, another nurse, Mark Jensen, covered her shift. Around 2 a.m., he called the front desk. "Hey, is someone doing checks on Ward C?" The operator replied, "No. Why?" "Because one of the monitors just lit up on my board. Room C17. Looks like a call light." The line went dead before they could answer. When they found him the next morning, he was sitting on the floor outside Ward C, staring blankly at the wall. His hair had turned white. He couldn't speak for 3 days. When he finally did, all he said was, he asked for his mom. After that, hospital management sealed Ward C completely. They welded the doors shut down the power grid for the entire section, and posted new warning signs. No one was supposed to go near it. But sometimes, on quiet nights, the nurses still hear it, the faint ding of a call light. And if they check the old monitoring board, one small red light will blink for just a few seconds. Room C17. Once, a security guard said he saw something even stranger on the hallway camera. A small shadow moving between the doors, stopping at the glass to look out. When they checked the feed again, the video was blank. The footage had erased itself. Now, the hospital staff say that if you walk past the East Wing late at night, you can sometimes hear it. A child's voice whispering from behind the welded door. "Where's my mom?" And if you answer him, he follows you home.
Laura Evans had worked night shifts for 5 years at St. Mary's General Hospital. The kind of nurse who could stay calm during chaos. She'd seen just about everything. Code glues, emergency surgeries, power failures. But lately, something about the East Wing had been getting under her skin. It was quiet there. Too quiet. After midnight, only 3 rooms were in use. The rest were empty, dark, and sealed off for maintenance. But there was one room, 302, that everyone avoided. Its door was always closed, its blinds drawn, and a handwritten sign taped to the front read, "Out of service." The first time Laura noticed it, she thought nothing of it. Hospitals were full of unused rooms. But one night, as she was updating charts at the nurse's station, a sound came from that hallway, a soft, rhythmic knocking. 3 taps, then silence. She looked up, expecting to see someone, maybe a janitor or an orderly, but the hall was empty. Only the flicker of the fluorescent lights reflected on the linoleum floor. She waited a few seconds, shook her head, and went back to work. Then it came again, 3 slow knocks. This time, Laura stood. She grabbed her flashlight and walked down the hall. Her shoes squeaked softly against the waxed floor. The sound was faint now, like it was coming from inside the walls. When she reached room 302, her heart thudded a little harder. The sign still hung there, "Out of service." She leaned closer, pressing her ear to the door. Nothing. Just silence. She turned to walk away and then heard it again. 3 sharp knocks from the inside. Laura froze. The rational part of her brain tried to explain it away. Pipes, ventilation, temperature changes. She'd heard them all before. But this didn't sound like that. It sounded deliberate, human. The next morning, she told her colleague Brenda about it. Brenda's face went pale. "Don't go near that room again," she said quietly. "Just don't." "Why? What's in there?" Brenda hesitated. "You weren't here last year, were you? A patient died in that room. Ventilator failure during the night shift. They said it was a system glitch, but the nurse on duty quit the next day. Said she saw things." Laura frowned. "Things?" Brenda shrugged, clearly uncomfortable. Lights flickering, shadows moving when no one was in there. The usual ghost stories. They shut the room down after that. Laura tried to laugh it off, but the thought lingered all day. That night, she made herself promise not to think about it. But when midnight came and the hospital quieted, she found herself glancing at the clock. 12:17, the same time she'd heard the knocks before. And as if on cue, 3 soft taps echoed down the hall. She stood slowly, her heart pounding in her ears. This time, she wasn't going to ignore it. She grabbed her flashlight again and walked toward room 302. The air in the hallway felt colder, the hum of the ceiling lights fading as she got closer. When she reached the door, she noticed something she hadn't before, a faint light coming from under it, a steady glow like a monitor, but the power was supposed to be off in that room. Her hand trembled as she pushed the door open. Inside, the room was clean and empty, except for the hospital bed in the center, covered neatly with white sheets. The heart monitor beside it was dark, unplugged. Or it should have been, because as she stepped closer, the screen suddenly flickered to life. A line appeared, then a slow, rhythmic beep. Laura's breath caught in her throat. The name displayed on the monitor read Henry Coleman. She knew that name. He was the patient Brenda had mentioned, the one who died here. She stumbled backward, slamming into the wall. The beep quickened. The line began to spike faster and faster, like a heartbeat returning. The temperature dropped sharply, her breath turning visible. Then, from the bed, the sheet shifted. Laura's flashlight trembled in her hand as she aimed it toward the sound. The shape beneath the blanket rose, slowly, unnaturally, like something pulling itself upright. She could see the outline of a head, shoulders, and then the sheet fell flat again. The monitor flatlined. Laura backed out of the room, heart racing, and ran straight to the nurse's station. But when she returned 10 minutes later with Brenda, the room was dark again. The monitor was unplugged, and the name Henry Coleman was gone. Brenda swore softly. "I told you not to come here." The next night, Laura tried to stay away from that hallway, but just after midnight, her pager buzzed. A code alert from room 302. She froze. There was no way. That room wasn't even on the system. Her radio crackled. "Laura, can you check 302? We're getting activity on the vitals monitor." Her stomach dropped. When she entered the room again, the air was icy cold. The lights flickered. The monitor screen glowed bright green, showing a pulse, steady, calm. And beside the bed, on the floor, was a fresh set of footprints. Bare, wet footprints leading toward the door. She turned the monitor, unplugged it completely, and taped the plug to the wall. Then she called maintenance and told them to lock the room permanently. For a week, nothing happened. Then one night, Laura was finishing her charting when she noticed her reflection in the dark window of the break room. Behind her, just faintly, stood a man. Pale skin, gray hospital gown, oxygen tube trailing down his face. She spun around. The room was empty. That night, she didn't sleep. She searched the hospital's archives online, looking for anything about Henry Coleman. She found a short report. Ventilator malfunction, death ruled accidental. Patient age, 47. Wife sued hospital, withdrew case after second incident in same room. Second incident. Laura scrolled further and found the nurse's resignation letter. The last line read, "I keep hearing him breathing when I walk past the door." The next shift, Laura asked to be reassigned. The supervisor agreed. They sealed the east wing for deeper renovation, finally disconnecting all power lines. But on her last night there, she had to pass the hallway one final time. As she approached room 302, she saw the door slightly ajar. Inside, it was completely dark, except for one thing. A single handprint on the inside of the glass. Fresh. Too high up for anyone to have left from the outside. She turned to leave, but the hallway lights began to flicker, one by one. Then came the sound. 3 slow knocks. The next morning, when the day shift arrived, they found Laura's clipboard lying in front of room 302. Her shift note stopped at 12:16 a.m. No one ever saw her again. Security footage later showed her walking down the east hallway, flashlight in hand, toward room 302. The timestamp froze at 12:17 a.m., the exact minute the lights went out across the entire wing for 7 seconds. When power returned, the footage showed only an empty corridor. And on the inside of room 302's window, beside that same handprint, there was a new one. Smaller, faintly visible under the morning sun. Just beneath it, written in condensation, were 3 words. "Help me breathe."
Dr. Patrick Hall had only been at Fairview Medical for 3 weeks when they assigned him to the night shift. The other residents warned him it was brutal. 12-hour stretches, barely any patients, endless paperwork, and the morgue duty that came with it. Most doctors hated that part, but Patrick didn't mind. The quiet halls and low hum of machines helped him think. At least, that's what he told himself. It was a little after midnight when the call came in. A cardiac arrest brought in too late to save. The man's name was George Whitman, age 63, heart failure at home. Standard case. Patrick signed the report, tagged the body, and wheeled it down to the basement. The morgue was always colder than the rest of the hospital. The flickering fluorescent bulbs gave off a weak, pale light, and every step Patrick took echoed like a hollow knock. He'd been there enough times already to know the layout. 6 storage drawers, 1 examination table, a freezer, and a small desk by the wall where the paperwork sat. He slid the gurney into an empty slot, double-checked the tag, and reached for the clipboard. Then, just as he picked up the pen, the overhead light buzzed and went out. The room plunged into shadow. Patrick sighed, shaking his head. The maintenance team had been promising to fix that light for days. He turned to leave, using his phone's flashlight to find the door. But then he heard it. The faintest, slow beep. He froze. It was unmistakable. The sound of a cardiac monitor. But there weren't any monitors in the morgue. None. He turned back, scanning the darkness. The beep came again, louder this time. It echoed off the metal walls, pulsing steadily. Beep, beep, beep. Patrick swallowed hard, his breath fogging in the cold air. He followed the sound to the drawer he'd just closed, the one with the tag reading Whitwin, George. The beep quickened slightly. "Impossible," he whispered. Still, he pulled the drawer open a few inches. The air inside was freezing. The sheet over the man's body was undisturbed, but when Patrick leaned closer, the heart monitor sound came from inside the drawer. He snatched back the sheet. The corpse lay motionless, skin gray and still, but then Patrick saw it, a faint rhythmic twitch in the man's chest, right where the heart would be. He stared, frozen in disbelief. Then the chest rose, a slow, shallow breath. Patrick stumbled backwards, his shoulder slamming into the wall. "No, no, no!" The man's eyes snapped open. For a heartbeat, Patrick couldn't move. The body wasn't just breathing, it was watching him. Its lips trembled as if trying to form words, and a sound, wet, broken, crawled out. "Doctor." Patrick bolted for the door. He hit the elevator button over and over, the light above it refusing to turn on. He glanced back. The drawer was still open, the sheet had fallen to the floor, and the beep had turned to a flat line. The morgue went silent. Patrick pressed his forehead against the cold metal door, whispering to himself, "He's dead. I saw the vitals. He's dead." Finally, the elevator dinged. He rushed inside, hands shaking, and jabbed the button for the main floor. The doors started to close, but then stopped halfway, as if something was blocking them. He looked down. A bare, gray hand was holding the door. He screamed and slammed the close button. The doors fought against the pressure, then snapped shut with a thud. The elevator rose. He stared at his reflection in the mirrored walls, breathing hard. Maybe he imagined it. Maybe it was stress, lack of sleep. But when he looked down at his clipboard, his blood ran cold. The page where he'd written "Time of Death, 12:42 a.m." was gone. In its place were 3 shaky words written in wet ink. "I wasn't done." He went straight to the nurse's station. "Did anyone check on the body from room 418, George Whitman?" Nurse Linda frowned. "Yeah, the morgue confirmed the transfer. Everything okay?" He hesitated. Yeah, fine. Just double-check the paperwork, will you?" He didn't sleep that morning. He kept seeing those eyes. The next night, his shift started like usual, but when he logged into the hospital system, he noticed something strange. The morgue status report showed an active patient file under Whitman, George. The file was locked, as if someone was updating it. Patrick frowned and clicked the access log. It showed a single entry, made from his own ID, 10 minutes ago. He hadn't logged in. His heart thudded as he glanced at the clock. 12:42 a.m. The lights flickered. He tried to call the security desk, but the phone only gave static. Then a voice whispered faintly through it, "Doctor." He slammed the receiver down. The intercom crackled again, a faint dragging sound, like a gurney rolling down a tile floor. Then the loudspeaker came alive with a familiar, chilling sound. Beep, beep, beep. A cardiac monitor, the same slow rhythm. The system tagged it automatically. Code blue, morgue. Patrick's mouth dried. No, I didn't want to go, but he was the only doctor on duty. So, flashlight in hand, he descended the stairs into the cold basement once more. When he opened the morgue door, it was pitch black. The light switch didn't work, but that beep guided him forward, echoing through the room. The sound came from the examination table. The monitor cable was plugged in, wires snaking toward the body that lay beneath the white sheet. He lifted it with trembling fingers. George Whitman was sitting upright. His skin was ashen, eyes open wide, pupils dilated like pools of ink. His lips were drawn back into a grin that exposed blue-gray teeth. Dried blood streaked his neck where the IV line had been.
He stumbled backwards, hitting a tray of instruments. The clatter echoed, and the body moved, slowly, deliberately, turning its head towards him. The heart monitor flatlined again, but the grin stayed. "Why did you leave me?" the corpse rasped. Patrick ran. He didn't look back. He slammed the morgue door shut, locked it, and bolted for the stairwell. His footsteps pounded against the concrete steps until he reached the first floor. When he burst through the doors, Nurse Linda jumped. "Dr. Hall, what happened? You look like you've seen a ghost." He didn't answer. He just collapsed into a chair, shaking. They found the morgue empty an hour later. The table was bare. The body was gone. Security checked the cameras. Every angle of the basement was visible, except the morgue itself. That feed showed only static for 15 minutes. When the image finally returned, the body drawer labeled Whitman George was closed. Inside, they found the body again, lying peacefully. But Patrick refused to go back down there. He took leave the next morning, tried to forget it, but when he got home, he found his voicemail light blinking. He pressed play. A slow mechanical beep filled the room, followed by the rasping voice he would never forget. "Still not done, doctor." He dropped the phone. The sound continued, faint at first, then growing louder, spreading through every speaker in his apartment. His TV turned on by itself. The hospital feed appeared on screen, the morgue camera now clear. A single gurney stood in the center of the room. On it, Patrick saw himself, lying still, pale, a tag on his toe. He gasped and backed away, but his phone buzzed again. The screen lit up with a new notification from the hospital system. Death certificate. Hall, Patrick. Time of death, 12:42 a.m. The monitor beeped once more, steady and cold. Then, silence. The next morning, the hospital staff found the morgue light on. Inside, there was one body, Dr. Patrick Hall. Cause of death, unknown. And beside him, on the steel counter, the clipboard lay open, signed neatly in black ink. Time of death confirmed. George Whitman, M.D.
Paramedic Jake Miller had seen more death than most people could stomach. Car wrecks, shootings, overdoses. It all became routine after a few years on the job. But nothing prepared him for the call that came on a rain-soaked Friday night in October. Dispatch sent him and his partner, Toby, to a single-vehicle crash off Highway 19. The voice on the radio said only one thing that stood out. Victim is unresponsive, but something's strange about this one. When they arrived, the flashing lights of the police cars cut through the mist. The sedan had slammed headfirst into a tree, the hood crumpled like paper. Steam hissed from the wreck. Inside, a man sat slumped over the steering wheel, middle-aged, pale, with dark hair matted by blood. His chest rose shallowly, almost imperceptible. Jake checked the pulse. Nothing. He grabbed the defibrillator paddles and shouted, "Clear!" The man's body jerked, but the monitor stayed flatlined. They tried again. Still nothing. "Call it," Toby said quietly. Jake hesitated. "We don't even know his name." The ID in his wallet read Daniel Carter, age 41. Jake sighed and filled in the report. Time of death, 11:47 p.m. They zipped the body bag, loaded him onto the gurney, and drove him to the hospital. It should have ended there, but it didn't. When they reached St. Margaret's ER, the charge nurse frowned. "You're bringing in another one?" Jake blinked. "Another?" "Yeah," she said. "We had a body come in 2 hours ago from a wreck out on the same road. Same description, same name, Daniel Carter." Jake laughed nervously. "Well, that's impossible." The nurse didn't laugh. She led him to the morgue, and there, lying cold under a sheet, was the same man. Same scar on his jaw. Same watch on his wrist. Jake's stomach twisted. There's no way. The doctor on call, Dr. Simmons, rubbed his eyes. I've worked 20 years and never seen anything like it. Same fingerprints, same dental records. He died here earlier tonight. Jake looked back toward the ER. The gurney they had just wheeled in was empty. The body was gone. Where's the patient? He asked. The nurse looked confused. You mean the corpse? Yes, the corpse. Where is it? She checked the chart. You didn't bring one in, Jake. The stretcher was empty when you got here. Jake's heart pounded. No, that's not… He was in there. We zipped the bag ourselves. Toby came around the corner, pale as chalk. Jake, he whispered, the monitor in the ambulance, it started beeping again. What? I checked the screen. It said Daniel Carter, heart rate 42 BPM, but we already unplugged it. Jake grabbed his keys. Let's go. They sprinted back to the ambulance. Rain pounded the windshield, the inside of the vehicle still damp from the trip. The heart monitor was still on and beeping steadily. Did you leave it running? Jake shook his head. No! On the screen, a pulse line glowed bright green. Jake's mouth went dry as he leaned closer. The monitor wasn't reading an empty signal. It was connected. He followed the wire to the floor. The cord snaked into the zipped body bag they'd brought in. Jake froze. No. The bag trembled. Jake whispered, "Don't open it!" The zipper began to move, on its own, sliding slowly down. A cold hand pushed out. Jake stumbled backward, knocking over the medical kit. The bag opened wider, and Daniel Carter sat up. Pale, eyes glassy, dried blood still on his forehead. His chest hung open, a faint wheezing sound escaping like a sigh. "Sir," Jake stammered, you were dead." Daniel turned his head, the joints cracking as he moved. His lips formed words that came out low and broken. "I never died." Then he smiled. Jake grabbed the defibrillator paddles instinctively. "Stay back!" But Daniel slid off the gurney, his bare feet slapping against the wet floor. The air in the ambulance grew cold, frosting the inside windows. Toby screamed, "Jake, let's go!" They ran out into the storm, slipping in the mud as thunder rolled overhead. When they looked back, the ambulance door was slowly closing on its own. Inside, the heart monitor flatlined. By the time security checked, the vehicle was empty again. Nobody, just the faint smell of decay and a wet footprint on the floor. Jake didn't sleep that night. He sat at his kitchen table staring at the report he'd filed. The handwriting looked strange, jagged, and the timestamp read 11:47 p.m. twice, the same minute. His phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. "Thanks for the ride." He dropped the phone. When he picked it up again, the message was gone. The next evening, he was called back for another emergency, a hit and run outside the old cemetery road. When they arrived, the victim lay on the pavement. Jake's heart nearly stopped when he saw the face. It was Daniel Carter. Again. This time his neck was broken, no pulse. Jake refused to touch him. Toby whispered, "We're not taking him." The police arrived and took over. The body went to the hospital again. But before the night ended, a report came over the radio. Morgue disturbance. One body missing. Suspect unknown. Jake couldn't breathe. He turned off his radio and drove home, trying to convince himself it was coincidence, some horrible mix-up. He got to his apartment around 3 a.m. The hallway lights flickered as he unlocked his door. The smell hit him immediately, something sour, like old blood. He flipped the light switch. The room was dark, but he saw it. Footprints, wet, muddy footprints leading from the doorway to his kitchen. He followed them slowly. His pulse hammered in his ears. On the kitchen table sat his report folder, the pages soaked through with water. And on top of it, the same hospital ID tag he'd placed on Daniel Carter's ankle. It read, "Deceased." Then he heard it. From the living room, the faint, steady beep of a heart monitor. He turned his head slowly. Daniel Carter was sitting on his couch. His skin was gray and glistening, eyes blackened and hollow, his lips twisted to something that looked like a grin. "You shouldn't have left me," he whispered. Jake stumbled backward, tripping over the table. "What do you want?" Daniel stood. "You brought me back. You made me breathe again. You can't stop it now." Every light in the apartment began flickering violently. The walls seemed to pulse, and the sound of a heartbeat filled the air. Loud, heavy, shaking the floor. Jake screamed and ran for the door, but when he grabbed the handle, it was ice cold. His skin burned where it touched the metal. Behind him, Daniel was walking slowly, each step wet and deliberate. "Don't you get it, Jake?" he rasped. "I can't die. Not until you do." Jake turned, grabbing the fire axe from the wall. He swung hard. The blade went straight through Daniel's chest. But instead of blood, dark water poured out, thick, reeking water that hissed where it hit the floor. Daniel's head snapped back, and he let out a guttural laugh. Jake dropped the axe and ran for the window, shoving it open and climbing out onto the fire escape. Rain poured down, soaking him instantly. He glanced back once. Daniel stood in the window, watching, smiling. Then lightning flashed, and he was gone. The next morning, his neighbors called the police about a loud noise in the middle of the night. They found his apartment empty, the lights still flickering. In the corner, on the couch, sat a single medical monitor. It was unplugged, but the screen glowed faintly. Heart rate, 42 BPM. That night, the same ambulance that Jake had driven was found idling in the hospital parking lot. No one inside, but the dash camera was still recording. The last few seconds of footage showed the passenger seat. A man with dark hair, pale skin, and black eyes turning slowly towards the camera, smiling. Then the video cut to black. The hospital later confirmed something strange. The file logged for Daniel Carter had merged with Jake's personal record. Now, the name on the monitor read, Patient Jake Miller. Status, alive. Time of death, pending.
Martha Green never expected to be back inside a hospital after retirement. She had spent 40 years as a nurse. Long nights, broken hearts, and the quiet duty of holding a stranger's hand during their last breath. When she finally retired, she promised herself she was done with all that. But after her husband passed, the silence of her little house became unbearable. So when the old St. Luke's County Hospital put out a call for volunteers, she signed up. It was an old building, brick walls, narrow corridors, and the faint smell of antiseptic that seemed older than the floor tiles. Most of the modern units had moved to the new hospital downtown, leaving this one half abandoned, running on old machines and older memories. Martha's shift was easy enough. She organized patient charts, made tea for the nurses, and read to some of the elderly patients in the long-term wing. It gave her a sense of purpose again. One gray afternoon, while refilling supply carts, she met Mr. Lewis.
He was sitting in room 204, an empty room with no name on the door. The man looked to be in his 80s, thin as paper, with a sharp, kind face and silver hair neatly combed back. He wore an old-fashioned doctor's coat, though the fabric was yellowed with age. "You must be new," he said, smiling warmly. "Haven't seen you around before." Martha smiled back. "Just started volunteering last week. Are you visiting someone?" He chuckled softly. "Visiting? No. I used to work here, back in the 50s. Chief surgeon, believe it or not." She blinked. "Really? My goodness, that's before my time. What was it like?" He leaned back in his chair, eyes shining with nostalgia. "Different. Quieter. We didn't have all these machines, just steady hands and steady hearts. Patients trusted us, sometimes too much." Martha laughed politely, though something in his tone felt heavy. Over the next few days, she found herself running into him again and again, in the halls, by the nurse's station, near the cafeteria. He always greeted her kindly, asking about her day, sharing stories about surgeries he performed, lives he saved, and the times he stayed up all night during blackouts with only candlelight and courage. She grew fond of him. One evening she decided to bring him tea. She found him sitting again in room 204, reading an old medical file by lamplight. "I thought you might like some company," she said. He looked up slowly. His smile was the same, gentle, reassuring. "That's very kind, Martha." "How do you know my name?" "I read your badge." But when she looked down, her badge was flipped backward. He continued before she could speak. "You remind me of someone I used to work with, a nurse back in 58. Same eyes. She used to hum when she was nervous." Martha chuckled nervously. "That sounds like me." He nodded. "Yes, her name was Martha, too." The tea trembled in her hand. She smiled faintly. "That's quite a coincidence." He didn't answer. He just looked at her with a sadness that chilled her to the bone. That night, Martha asked the charge nurse about him. "Mr. Lewis?" the nurse repeated, frowning. "We don't have a patient or staff member by that name." "No, not a patient, an old surgeon. He said he used to work here." The nurse gave her a strange look. "Honey, Dr. Lewis was the first chief surgeon here. Died in 1959. They named the West Wing after him." Martha's throat tightened. "No, that's impossible. I just saw him today." The nurse shrugged. "You're not the first one to say that." That night, Martha couldn't sleep. She told herself it was a misunderstanding, maybe a prank, maybe some old man playing dress-up. But deep down, she knew what she'd seen. When she came in the next morning, the visitor logbook caught her eye. Each volunteer had to sign in, and next to every name was a timestamp. She flipped to yesterday's page. There, written neatly in black ink, was the name Dr. Henry Lewis, signed at 5:42 p.m. Her heart pounded. She turned the page. The ink wasn't dry. It looked fresh. She decided to go to room 204 again, just to prove to herself it was nothing. The door was open. The room was empty. The air felt colder, heavier. She turned to leave, but stopped when she saw a shadow move across the wall, long, tall, and unimaginably human. "Dr. Lewis?" she whispered. A voice answered softly from behind her. "You came back." She turned, trembling. He stood by the bed, the same old coat hanging loosely from his shoulders, but his face looked different now. Hollow, his eyes sunken deep like bruises. His skin had gone gray. "Why are you here?" she asked quietly. He tilted his head. "I never left." The lamp flickered violently. The air grew freezing cold, and every monitor in the hallway beeped at once. Martha backed toward the door, but it slammed shut before she could touch it. Dr. Lewis stepped closer. The smell of rot filled the air. "I tried to save them,"
he whispered, voice cracking. But the generator failed. The lights went out. One by one, they stopped breathing, and I couldn't stop it. Tears rolled down his face, but they were black, thick as ink. I stayed to make it right, he said. But they won't let me go. Martha could barely breathe. Who won't let you go? He looked past her toward the hallway. Them. A low hum filled the air, growing louder and louder until it sounded like distant screams. The window glass shook, and through the reflection, Martha saw movement, dozens of figures standing in the hallway outside, patients in torn gowns, their eyes black and empty, staring through the glass. Dr. Lewis reached for her. You shouldn't be here. Martha stumbled back, terrified. Please, I don't... Leave, he said sharply, before they remember your name. The door flew open, and she bolted. She didn't stop running until she reached the elevator. As the doors closed, she looked back down the hall and saw him watching her. His face was calm again, almost peaceful. When she returned the next day, room 204 was sealed shut with yellow caution tape. A sign read, "Renovation area, do not enter." She told no one what happened. But when she went to sign in that morning, the volunteer logbook was already open. Her name was there, written neatly in old black ink under a single new line, "Welcome back, Nurse Martha," and signed next to it in the same handwriting as before, Dr. Henry Lewis. That was the last day Martha ever came to St. Luke's. The staff said she went home and never answered calls again. Weeks later, the new volunteer opened the visitor logbook. Beneath all the recent names, a faint handwritten note appeared overnight. She stayed too.
Dr. Thomas Reynolds had worked in the intensive care unit at Crestview Medical Center for over 15 years. He'd seen people die, recover, and sometimes cling to life far longer than anyone thought possible. But there was one thing he could never explain: the pattern that haunted ICU room number 7. Every patient who was moved into that room died within 24 hours. It didn't matter what the diagnosis was: pneumonia, fractures, even mild observation cases. The outcome was always the same. Within a day, they would flatline. Some called it coincidence. Others whispered about the room. But no one, not even Dr. Reynolds, had an answer. He didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in heart rates, scans, and numbers that made sense. But when the 5th patient in a month died in ICU number 7 without warning, something in him broke. He asked maintenance to check for carbon leaks, electrical faults, anything. They found nothing. No toxins, no wiring issues, no bad equipment. The room was perfectly normal. Except it wasn't. That evening, Reynolds sat in his office reviewing charts. The hospital was quiet, the hum of the air conditioning echoing down the hallways. As he reached for his coffee, his pager buzzed. A new patient was being transferred from the ER to ICU number 7. He sighed. Not again. He walked down the corridor, the fluorescent lights humming faintly overhead. Nurses hurried past, wheeling machines and IV stands. When he reached the door to room 7, he paused. Through the glass, he saw a woman lying still on the bed. Her monitor showed stable vitals: heart rate 82, oxygen 97%. Everything looked fine. The nurse on duty, Clara, looked nervous. She's post-surgery. Name's Margaret Hale, routine appendectomy, stable all night. Good, Reynolds said. Let's keep it that way. He didn't tell her that this room had killed 6 people in the last month. By midnight, the hospital had gone silent. Reynolds was finishing paperwork when the lights flickered. It happened once, then again, the faint buzzing of the fluorescent bulbs faltering for a few seconds. Then he heard it, a faint hiss through the intercom. He frowned.
The intercom wasn't active at this hour. He stood up and pressed the receiver. Hello? Static. Then a whisper. Help me. His chest tightened. The voice was faint, feminine. Who is this? He asked. The whisper came again, closer now, as if someone were breathing right into the speaker. He won't let me go. Reynolds froze. Who won't let you go? Static crackled violently, followed by a loud beep, the sound of a flatline alarm. Room 7. He ran. When he burst through the door, the patient was still. The heart monitor screamed with a continuous tone. Clara was already there, pressing the crash cart pedal. She just dropped, doctor. 1 second she was fine. The next... Move, he shouted, starting CPR. They shocked her once, twice, nothing. Then, just as he raised the paddles again, the monitor flickered. A single heartbeat appeared. Then another. She gasped, a ragged, wet sound, and whispered something weakly. Reynolds leaned close. What did you say? Her lips trembled. It's in the air. Then her eyes rolled back, and she was gone. The monitor flatlined again. Reynolds stood frozen, sweat dripping down his neck. Time of death, 12:14 a.m., Clara whispered, trembling. He couldn't shake her last words. It's in the air. He checked the ventilation system, the oxygen tubes, everything. All fine. But when he opened the vent grate, the smell hit him. Faint, but unmistakable. Rot. He pulled out his flashlight and shined it into the vent. The beam caught something. Faint letters scratched into the metal. Help me. The next morning he ordered the room sealed for cleaning. But that night, it was used again. A shortage of ICU beds forced another transfer. An elderly man, mild heart issue. He protested. Move him somewhere else. But the charge nurse shook her head. No other rooms available. He'll be fine until morning. He wasn't. At exactly 2:47 a.m., the monitor in room 7 began to spike wildly, and then flatline. Security footage from that night showed something impossible. In the corner of the room, near the vent, a faint fog appeared just before the man's monitor began to fail. The mist lingered for a few seconds before vanishing. Reynolds watched the footage 10 times. He couldn't explain it. That night, he decided to stay. He waited until the ward was empty, then entered room 7 alone. The air was cold, unnaturally still. The heart monitor was off, the bed stripped bare. He turned on a small audio recorder and sat beside the bed. Room 7, ICU, Dr. Reynolds, 1:03 a.m. Conducting overnight observation. The lights flickered. For 30 minutes, nothing happened. He started to feel foolish. Then, the monitor, unplugged, completely dead, turned on by itself. A single green line pulsed across the screen. Reynolds stared in disbelief. The machine wasn't even connected to power. Then came the sound. A faint hiss, like the respirator's rhythm. Then, beneath it, something else. A whisper. Thomas. His stomach turned. Who is there? The voice grew louder. You left me. He stumbled back. Who are you? The heart monitor began to spike rapidly, each beep echoing like a heartbeat in the dark. You left me to die, the voice said again, clearer now and familiar. It was his first patient, the one he'd lost years ago, a young woman named Emily. He'd tried to save her, but a ventilator malfunction had cut her oxygen and she'd suffocated before help arrived. He'd never forgiven himself. He whispered, Emily? A shadow formed near the bed, the outline of a woman, her face obscured. The air grew colder, his breath turning white. Why here? He asked, trembling.
Her voice was hollow, distorted. "Because you made me stay." He shook his head. "No, I didn't." "You did," she whispered. "Every time you remembered me, every night you replayed it, you kept me alive in this room." The heart monitor blared with an endless tone. "Emily, I didn't mean to—" The shadow moved closer, her features becoming visible, gray skin, lips blue, and eyes sunken and full of rage. "You don't get to mean any more." The bed began to shake violently. The walls groaned. The lights exploded, plunging the room into darkness. Reynolds screamed, covering his face. When the power came back, the room was empty. The next morning, the nurses found him unconscious on the floor. He was alive, but barely. When he woke up, his hair had gone white. He refused to speak about what happened. The hospital finally closed room 7. But months later, when new staff reopened it for inspection, they found something scratched deep into the metal vent. Fresh letters, drawn by a trembling hand. "I tried to save her." And just beneath it, in smaller writing that shimmered when the light hit it, "But she won't save you." That night, security reported hearing a faint beep from the sealed ICU. It came from room 7. A steady, slow heartbeat.
Nurse Olivia Price had only been at Riverside General Hospital for 6 months when she started hearing about the elevator. Every old building has its quirks, flickering lights, creaky floors, and faulty doors, but this one was different. People said that when you took the east side elevator after midnight, it sometimes stopped on B level, the basement floor that had been sealed off years ago. The reason? As the story went, an asbestos leak had shut it down in the late 90s. No staff worked down there anymore, and the hospital had bricked off the stairwell to that level. But the elevator still had a button for it, and sometimes it lit up on its own. Olivia didn't believe it at first. Hospitals were full of gossip. Nurses loved a ghost story on slow nights. But that changed one Friday, near the end of her shift. It was almost 2 a.m., and the hospital was silent except for the hum of machines and distant rolling carts. She was heading down to the first floor to pick up supplies, her badge clipped to her scrubs, her eyelids heavy with exhaustion. She stepped into the east elevator, pressed 1, and leaned against the cold metal wall. The doors closed with a soft hiss. The car began to descend smoothly. Then, halfway down, it jolted to a stop. The lights flickered. The panel buzzed. Olivia frowned and hit the open door button. Nothing happened. Then she noticed something strange. The floor indicator wasn't showing 2 or 1. It was glowing faintly red. B. Her stomach dropped. "That's not possible," she whispered. The elevator shuddered once, then slowly began to move again, down. The air grew colder, the overhead light dimmed to a sickly yellow. She could hear faint static, like an old radio hidden somewhere inside the walls. When the doors finally slid open, a wall of darkness greeted her. A single flickering bulb illuminated part of a hallway she didn't recognize. Cracked tile floors, rusted pipes, and peeling green paint that looked decades old. She should have pressed the closed door button. She should have gone straight back up. But curiosity, that old enemy of reason, got the better of her. She stepped out. The elevator door shut behind her with a quiet click. Her footsteps echoed in the stillness. The smell of mold and disinfectant filled her nose. She saw faded signage hanging crookedly from the ceiling. Radiology, records, morgue. She laughed nervously to herself. Okay, great, horror movie territory.
As she moved forward, she noticed something even stranger. The hallway didn't look abandoned. The fluorescent lights ahead flickered to life one by one, revealing clean walls and working machines. A nurse's cart stood by the wall. A monitor blinked softly, its screen alive with green lines. Then she heard it, the faint squeak of shoes. Someone was walking. "Hello? Is someone down here?" No answer. She took another step. The hallway seemed longer now, stretching ahead unnaturally. The sound of footsteps grew louder, not hers, slow and deliberate, coming closer. Her heart raced. She turned back toward the elevator, but the hallway behind her was gone. In its place was another corridor, identical but reversed, like a mirror image. "Okay, I'm dreaming," she muttered, clutching her badge. "I must have fallen asleep at the station." Then the intercom above her crackled to life. "Code Blue, B level! Code Blue, B level!" Her breath caught. That voice, she recognized it. It was her voice. The sound repeated, "Code Blue, B level!" She turned and ran, her shoes slapped against the tile, the air thick with static. The walls began to darken, the paint bubbling as though heat was spreading underneath. She turned a corner and stopped. There, at the end of the hall, stood a hospital bed. A patient lay on it, covered by a thin white sheet. The monitor beside it was alive, beeping slowly. The line pulsed, beep, beep, beep. She swallowed hard. "Hello? Can you hear me?" The sheet moved slightly, as if someone underneath had taken a breath. "Sir? Ma'am?" She reached for the sheet and froze when she saw the ID bracelet on the arm hanging off the bed. It had her name on it, Olivia Price. Her mind spun. She yanked the sheet down and gasped. The face staring back was her own. The skin was pale, lips blue, eyes open and glassy. She screamed, stumbling backward. The monitor flatlined. The lights above exploded one by one, showering sparks. The walls shook, the intercom repeating her voice again and again. "Code Blue, B level! Code Blue!" She bolted toward where she thought the elevator was, breath ragged. The doors were open, glowing with light. Relief flooded her chest. She jumped inside and hit the one button over and over. The doors closed. The car began to rise. Her reflection in the metal doors looked pale, drenched in sweat. She wiped her eyes and froze. Her reflection wasn't copying her movements. It was smiling. She stumbled back as the elevator lights dimmed again. The reflection's grin widened unnaturally, teeth blackened and sharp. Its hand lifted and pressed something on the panel that she couldn't see. The elevator stopped. The display flickered once, then glowed red. B. The door slid open. Olivia screamed. The hallway beyond was filled with figures, dozens of them. Doctors and nurses in old uniforms, their faces gray and hollow, eyes black pits. They stood in perfect silence, waiting. At the front was her reflection, stepping out of the glass. It tilted its head, identical to her in every detail except for its eyes, completely black. "You were never supposed to leave," it whispered. The figures moved closer, whispering in unison, a wave of soft voices that filled the elevator. "Stay with us, stay with us, stay with us." Olivia slammed every button on the panel, but they wouldn't light. The elevator wouldn't move. The figures reached out, cold hands pressing against the threshold. And then, darkness. The next morning, the elevator doors on the first floor opened to an empty car. But when a janitor stepped inside, he noticed something odd. The walls were covered in small bloody fingerprints,
and on the floor display, the B button was glowing faintly red, even though it had been disabled years ago. That night, a new nurse took the same elevator. Halfway down, the car jolted to a stop. When the doors opened, she saw a woman standing in the basement hallway, pale, wide-eyed, wearing scrubs with a name badge that read Olivia Price. The nurse called out, "Hey, are you okay?" Olivia smiled faintly and whispered, "I finally made it back." Then the elevator doors closed, and the B button stayed lit for the rest of the night.
The night shift was supposed to be calm at St. Bridget's Hospital, especially after 2 a.m. when the world outside was asleep, and the only sounds inside were the soft beeps of monitors and the distant rumble of cleaning machines. Nurse Greg Turner liked it that way. The quiet meant fewer emergencies and more time to think. He'd worked here for 9 years, and in that time he'd developed a comforting routine. Finish the logs by 1, check the patients at 2, coffee at 3, and rounds again before dawn. But that peace ended the night he did his last rounds. It started normally enough. The corridors glowed dim under emergency lights, and the air smelled faintly of bleach. Greg walked from room to room, checking charts, adjusting drips, scribbling notes. Everything was fine, until he reached room 309. It was empty. The bed was neatly made, the sheets crisp, and the lights off. He frowned, flipping through the clipboard hanging by the door. According to the list, Mrs. Lillian Marsh, age 79, was supposed to be there. Her status? Alive. Observation overnight. He tapped his pen against the page. Maybe she got moved, he muttered. But there was no transfer form, no record, nothing. He decided to finish his rounds before investigating. Half an hour later, he stopped by the nurse's station. His colleague Rita was sipping coffee, scrolling through her phone. "Hey," said Greg, "do you know what happened to Mrs. Marsh in 309? She's not there." Rita frowned. "Who?" "Lillian Marsh." Rita checked the system. "There's no one by that name admitted." Greg frowned. "That can't be right. I just signed her intake form yesterday. She came in with chest pain." Rita turned the monitor toward him. The bed chart for 309 showed empty. "Maybe you're mixing up rooms," she said softly. He wasn't. He knew every room in that wing like the back of his hand. Still, he forced a smile and shrugged. Maybe. But unease settled deep in his gut. By 3 a.m., he couldn't stop thinking about it. He decided to check again, just to prove to himself that he wasn't losing it. The hallway was darker now, quieter. The fluorescent lights hummed softly above him as he approached room 309. The door was still closed. He took a deep breath and pushed it open. The room was dark, but not empty. Someone was lying in the bed. Greg froze. "Mrs. Marsh?" The figure didn't move. He reached for the light switch, but the lamp flickered weakly, barely illuminating the shape beneath the covers. The heart monitor beside the bed glowed a faint green. Beep, beep, beep. He stepped closer. The chart was still blank. No name, no ID band. Then the patient moved, slowly. Her hand, thin, trembling, reached toward him. Greg instinctively grabbed her wrist to check her pulse. Cold, ice cold. "Mrs. Marsh, you're not supposed to be—" Her eyes opened. Cloudy, lifeless eyes that stared straight through him. He jumped back, heart hammering, but the monitor kept beeping, steady as ever. "Help me!"
she croaked. Her voice sounded dry, like air escaping an old balloon. He hesitated. "What's wrong?" She blinked slowly. "You forgot me." "What?" "You forgot to sign me out." I felt my stomach twist. "What are you talking about?" "You left me here last night." "No, I didn't." The monitor flatlined. The sudden shriek of the alarm echoed through the room. Greg stumbled toward the console, pressing buttons, but the display refused to respond. The monitor wasn't even plugged in. The lights went out. He stood frozen in pitch blackness, the sound of the flatline ringing in his ears. Then, slowly, the bed creaked. Something was moving. "Mrs. Marsh?" he whispered. A low, rattling breath answered him, right behind his ear. He spun around. Nothing. The emergency lights flickered back on, casting long shadows on the walls. The bed was empty again. The sheets, however, were still indented, as if someone had just gotten up. And there, on the glass window of the room, was a handprint. A pale, smudged handprint from the inside. Greg ran back to the nurse's station, panting. Rita looked up startled. "Greg, what happened?" He pointed toward the hall. "There was someone in 309. She spoke to me." Rita frowned. "Greg, 309 sealed. That room's been empty since—" She stopped mid-sentence. "Since what?" he demanded. She hesitated. "Since the oxygen tank fire, 4 years ago. The patient inside, Lillian Marsh, died." His mouth went dry. "That's not possible." Rita looked pale. "You're tired. Go get some air." But he couldn't shake the feeling. When his shift ended at sunrise, he went straight to the archives. The file was there. Lillian Marsh died in room 309 during an overnight observation. Time of death, 3:07 a.m. Cause, oxygen supply malfunction. He checked the date, 4 years ago to the day. He slammed the folder shut and left, refusing to look back. That night, he requested a different floor assignment. He told himself it was just coincidence, exhaustion, imagination, nerves. But a week later, during another late shift, Rita called him to the station, her face pale as snow. She turned the CCTV monitor toward him. The feed showed room 309. The light inside flickered on and off, though no one had entered. The bed was empty, but on the far corner of the screen, a faint figure moved. A woman in a patient gown, thin, white-haired, drifting across the room like smoke. Rita whispered, "The motion sensor keeps triggering every night at 3:07. They watched as the woman walked toward the door, then turned to face the camera. Her expression was blank, but her eyes were fixed straight at the lens, straight at Greg. The screen went black. They sat in silence for a long time. That was the last time anyone volunteered for night duty in that wing. Room 309 was sealed for good, the power cut, the door bolted. But sometimes, the nurses still find Greg's old clipboard lying near that hallway. The last note he ever wrote before transferring to another hospital reads, "All rounds complete, except room 309. Status? Alive." And every year, on the anniversary of the fire, that same line appears again in the logs, in Greg's handwriting, even though he hasn't worked there in years. The cleaning staff say if you pass that corridor around 3 a.m., you can hear it, the faint beep of a heart monitor from behind the sealed door. Beep, beep, beep. And sometimes a woman's voice whispering softly through the vents. You forgot to sign me out.
The night desk at Maplewood Community Hospital was the kind of quiet that made you hear things you weren't sure were real. Phones clicked softly as lines transferred. Printers hummed now and then. And beyond the glass doors, the world outside was black and still. Daniel Reeves had worked the hospital switchboard for almost 3 years. He liked the night shift. It was calm, predictable, until one night it wasn't. It began around 12:31 a.m. The phone on his desk rang once, then stopped. Then again. Then again. He frowned, checking the panel. The call was coming from room 19. He clicked his pen, puzzled. Room 19? That can't be right. According to the layout, that room didn't exist anymore. 2 years ago, a gas leak explosion had destroyed that section of the hospital. 7 people died, patients and 1 nurse. The whole wing had been sealed off ever since. He stared at the screen. The light blinked again. Room 19. He hesitated, then answered. Maplewood Hospital, this is Daniel. Hello? Static hissed softly on the other end. Then, a faint whisper. Help us. Daniel sat up straight. Who is this? The line went dead. He checked the board again. The call log showed the extension as active. But that was impossible. That phone line had been removed years ago. He radioed the night guard, Tom, who was half asleep in the lobby. Hey, Tom, I just got a call from room 19. Tom chuckled. Room 19 doesn't exist, man. You need coffee. I'm serious. I heard someone. Fine, I'll take a look. Daniel watched the security feed as Tom's flashlight beam daubed down the long, empty corridor toward the old south wing. Dust and debris filled the floor. A plastic barrier sealed the far end where the explosion had happened. Nothing here, Tom said through the radio. Just rubble. Relax. Daniel exhaled. Maybe it was a glitch. The switchboard was ancient. But at 1:04 a.m., the phone rang again. He answered instantly. Hello, who is this? A long pause. Then the same whisper, clearer now. We never checked out. His skin crawled. Who are you? Cold. Still here. His hand shook as he hung up. He double-checked the system logs. The source line still read 19. He tried to reroute the number. The computer rejected the command with an error. Line occupied. He stared at the board. The light for room 19 was still glowing. Tom returned a few minutes later, his face pale. Dan, you're not going to believe this. The barrier down there, someone pulled it open. What do you mean? There's a phone on the wall, old rotary type. It's off the hook. Daniel's throat dried. There's no power in that wing, Tom. I know. They both stared at each other for a long moment. Tom forced a laugh. It's probably some sick prank. Maybe the line's crossed with another extension. Yeah, Daniel said, though he didn't believe it. At 2:13 a.m., it rang again. Tom jumped. Don't answer it. Daniel hesitated. Then, slowly, he picked it up. Hello? Who is this? This time, the voice wasn't a whisper. It was a man's voice, broken, heavy, and close to tears. We can't breathe down here. Daniel's pulse pounded in his ears. Where are you? The fire. It never stopped. He slammed the receiver down. Tom whispered, We're leaving that line alone. You hear me? But the phone kept ringing, over and over.
By 3 a.m., the noise was unbearable. Constant calls from the same dead room. Daniel finally stood. "I'm going down there." Tom grabbed his arm. "Are you insane?" "I need to see it. Maybe it's some squatter or a short circuit. I can't just sit here and listen." Tom reluctantly followed. The south wing was darker than he expected. The power was truly out. No emergency lights, just the narrowed beam of their flashlights slicing through dust. The walls were blackened from the old explosion, and the air smelled faintly of burnt plaster. When they reached the end of the hall, Tom froze. The plastic barrier was torn. Behind it, the remnants of room 19. The floor tiles were cracked, the windows shattered, and in the center of the room stood an old rusted wall phone, receiver dangling, swinging slightly, as if someone had just hung it up. Daniel's breath hitched. No way. He stepped forward and lifted the phone slowly. No dial tone. Then, faintly, static. "Help us." He dropped it instantly. The receiver hit the wall, clattering to the floor. Tom's flashlight flickered. "We're leaving. Let's get out of here now." But before they could turn, the sound of another phone began ringing, this time behind them. Then another. The echo ringed with overlapping rings, one after another, coming from nowhere and everywhere. Tom shouted, "Run!" They bolted down the corridor, the ringing following them, echoing louder, almost mechanical, until, suddenly, silence. When they reached the elevator, Daniel's radio crackled. A voice, female this time, calm and distant. "Operator?" He froze. The voice was coming from his own radio, though no one was transmitting. "Operator," it repeated, "you didn't answer the call." He threw the radio down the stairwell. When they got back to the front desk, Daniel's phone was ringing again. Tom whispered, "Don't." But Daniel, trembling, picked it up. This time, there was no whisper, just faint breathing. Then a single voice spoke, slow and cold. "You heard us now." The line went dead. The next morning, when the day staff arrived, Daniel and Tom were gone. Their things were still there: keys, coffee mugs, jackets. The switchboard log showed the last call from room 19 at 3:33 a.m. The line had disconnected itself after that. For a while, no one believed the story. The hospital replaced the phones, updated the systems, and sealed the south wing again. But a few months later, the new night operator called in sick after a strange incident. She said she'd been answering calls all night, routine things, transfers, updates, until one line came through she didn't recognize. When she checked the screen, her blood ran cold. The caller ID said room 19. She picked up. "Maplewood Hospital, how may I direct your—" A low voice interrupted. "You're new." She froze. The voice continued. "We used to speak to Daniel. Do you know where he went?" She hung up immediately. Security checked the board. The call had never been logged. But the next morning, the janitor found an old rotary phone sitting on the floor outside the sealed south wing, one that hadn't been there before. It was off the hook, and on the receiver, written in faded red ink, were 3 words: "Line still active."
The basement of St. Alden's Hospital had always been a place most staff avoided. The upper floors were clean and bright, full of modern equipment and chatter, but down below, the air was different, colder, heavier, as if it carried the weight of something old.
When the hospital began renovation to expand the emergency department, Laura Bennett, the lead architect, was called in to assess the structure. The blueprints showed a small section beneath the east wing that wasn't marked in any recent plans. It was listed simply as Old OR3. No one knew what that meant. According to the hospital's history, the East Wing had once housed the original surgical theater built in the 1930s. It was shut down decades ago after a fire and left sealed. Laura, who prided herself on logic and precision, didn't believe in ghost stories, but the maintenance workers refused to go near that section, saying the machines there still hummed at night, even though the power had long been cut. She decided to check it herself. It was late in the evening when she arrived, the perfect time to inspect without interrupting anyone's shift. The maintenance chief, an old man named Harris, met her by the elevator with a flashlight and a nervous look. "You sure you want to go down there alone?" he asked. Laura smiled politely. "I've seen worse basements." He didn't smile back. "Keep your radio on, just in case." The elevator doors creaked open, and she descended into the dark. The smell hit her first, stale air mixed with something metallic. The hallway stretched out before her, lined with dust-covered signs that read Sterilization Room, Scrub Area, and Operating Room 3. She ran her flashlight along the walls. The paint was peeling, revealing old tile beneath. Water dripped steadily from a pipe overhead, echoing down the corridor. When she reached the sealed door marked OR3, she noticed the metal had been recently disturbed, faint scratches around the handle as if someone had tried to pry it open. Her curiosity flared. "Must have been the last inspection crew," she muttered. Using a crowbar, she forced the lock open. The door groaned open with a long, low creak. The room inside was frozen in time. A massive surgical light hung above an old steel table, the kind used in the mid-20th century. Rusted instruments lay neatly arranged on trays. Cabinets filled with empty bottles lined the walls. The strangest part, when she flipped the main switch, the overhead lamps flickered and buzzed to life. There was no power supply connected. Her breath caught. "That's impossible!" She stepped closer to the table. A thin layer of dust covered everything, except the instruments. The scalpels gleamed. The forceps were spotless. Someone had cleaned them recently. Her flashlight beam landed on a clipboard lying beside the tray. The paper was yellowed with age, but the ink looked fresh. At the top, in neat handwriting, it read, "Procedure, craniotomy. Patient, Laura Bennett." Her fingers went numb. What the hell? She dropped the clipboard and stumbled backward. The surgical light above her flickered once, then twice, and then turned, ever so slightly, until it pointed directly at her. The room hummed. The air grew thick, heavy with the scent of disinfectant and something faintly sweet, chloroform. She reached for her radio. "Harris, come in. I'm in below OR. I need backup down here." Static answered. Then, faintly, through the crackling, "Get out. Now." Her flashlight flickered out. The hum from the lamp grew louder, vibrating through the walls. And then beneath that sound came something else, the faint clatter of metal. She turned toward the surgical tray. The instruments were moving. The scalpel spun slowly in place. The clamps clicked open and shut. The heart of the sound came from the steel table, which now gleamed as if newly polished. And then she saw it, a shape under the cloth. Something breathing. Her body froze. Her hand trembled as she reached for the edge of the cloth and pulled it back. The corpse on the table was dressed in a surgeon's uniform, its face pale and stretched tight over bone. The eyes were open and glowing faintly. She stumbled back, choking on a scream. The body's hand twitched, the fingers curling. Then it sat up.
The sound of cracking bones echoed in the cold room as the figure lifted its head. A surgical mask dangled from its neck. It turned to her slowly, its mouth hanging open. "Scalpel," it croaked. Laura bolted for the door, but it slammed shut before she could reach it. She threw herself against it, pounding until her palms burned. Behind her, the body moved closer, dragging its feet across the tile. "Procedure begins," the voice rasped. Laura turned, sobbing. "Stay away from me!" The lights flickered wildly, illuminating flashes of movement. The corpse now standing by the table, the instruments levitating, arranging themselves in the air. "Hold her," the voice said again. Invisible hands gripped her arms, cold as ice. She screamed, thrashing against nothing, but the more she struggled, the tighter they held. She was forced backward, pinned to the table. The lamp above her glared to full brightness, blinding her. She could feel the scalpel pressing against her skin, not cutting, just resting there. Then, from above her, that same whisper, closer now, right beside her ear. "You're next." The lights exploded. Silence. When Harris finally mustered the courage to go down 2 hours later, he found the OR door wide open. The room was spotless, the lights worked perfectly, but there was no sign of Laura. Her tools were still neatly packed, her flashlight lying on the floor. The clipboard remained on the tray. The paper had changed. It now read, "Procedure complete. Surgeon, Dr. H. Whitaker. Patient, Laura Bennett. Status, deceased." Her body was never found. The renovation team sealed the lower floor permanently after that. But sometimes at night, when the power flickers in the new emergency wing, staff swear they hear it, a faint, buzzing hum beneath the floors, and in the silence that follows, a woman's voice, whispering through the vents, soft and desperate. "Scalpel, please, no!" Security once sent a technician down to check the wiring. He returned pale as chalk, holding a torn piece of surgical paper he found under a vent grate. It had only 3 words on it, written in neat, fresh ink. "Next procedure pending."